Hi, I'm Sila Shaman. Like pretty much the rest of the world, I spent 2020 mostly in my home with my family. In our case, it's our apartment in New York City, trying to make sense of all the sudden changes that the pandemic brought to our lives. As a composer and a performer, it was only natural for me to explore things through sound, and I began working on a collection of pieces. When I was invited to participate in the Wider Vision series, I wanted to translate and transform some of this work into a visual format, and the culmination was the piece you're about to see called Transmission. I am very grateful to Corvallis-OSU Piano International for inviting me and for providing me a ground to present this work. I am very thankful to you, the audiences out there in Corvallis and the rest of the world, for listening, for watching. I would also like to thank my husband, Jeffrey Shaman, who happens to be a disease expert and a epidemiologist who models coronavirus, for taking some of his really valuable time to participate in this project with me. Stay safe out there, be healthy, take care, and I hope you enjoy.
There's no one on the streets. I mean, there are cars, obviously, but very little people.
I think we're all getting the itch to get out. We all wish we could go back to normal. And there's going to be, and it's not something that we look at as being sustainable. We have to find a way to allow ourselves to emerge out and to have some level of interaction, but we have to figure out
This is the sound of my balcony opening and shutting. This is the sound of me walking in an empty apartment 7,500 miles away from my girlfriend and 3,000 miles away from my family who I have to Skype.
I haven't been out of the house for
you do it
at
with
least
social
3 or 4
distancing
days.
practices. Maybe
That's the
everybody
first time I'm out.
Family
There it
who I have to
is.
Skype. It's the sound of the box opening of a TRX Go suspension trainer, which enables me to do some exercise inside now that Planet Fitness is closed. This is the creak of the door frame as I hang from a pull-up bar that I purchased for the same purpose.
Now, if everybody sits 6 feet apart and everybody wears masks and nobody violates those kinds of rules, it might be a relatively safe environment.
It's the sound of actually nothing. That's actually other than me under house arrest, feeling resentful at my own resentment at the global pandemic for which me and my situation doesn't matter, and I'm quite privileged, and I'm annoyed at being annoyed, and sending this to people that I love who are also very far.
It's really run through us and continues to do so. In late 2019, a novel coronavirus capable of sustained human-to-human transmission spilled over from an animal reservoir into humans. That virus, designated Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2, is the causative agent of coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19. We're now at the end of 2020. There have been over 82 million confirmed cases globally and 1.8 million confirmed deaths. Most of the viruses that have emerged of late, and there have been a whole bunch of viruses that have had pandemic potential, things like SARS-1 and MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, influenza H5N1 or H7N9, they have not had this critical characteristic where they're able to produce a lot of mild infections in addition to producing some severe ones. And it's this critical characteristic that allows them to get around. Now, the problem that we saw very quickly, very early on, in association with SARS-CoV-2, which is the causative agent of COVID-19, is that it moves very quickly. It was getting on airplanes out of China and going to Thailand, to Japan, South Korea, and the US. It moved very quickly throughout China. And the reason we suspected it was capable of doing this was that the majority of people who were infected with this virus never knew they had it. They had what you and I suffer in the wintertime typically when we get a cold, a little sore throat, maybe a little body ache, but it didn't stop them from going around. It didn't stop them from going shopping, going out and getting on trains and planes and going to other communities and spreading the virus far and wide. That critical characteristic is what has supported this virus and allowed it to get around so quickly. As a matter of fact, we can see that most people who get this virus do not wind up seeking clinical care. They do not wind up in the hospital, and they are not at risk. But these people are still contagious, and they allow the virus to get around. Now, it doesn't mean it's not a problem, because a lot of people get infected when you have a novel pandemic agent. It's a respiratory virus. Everybody in the world essentially has no pre-existing immunity to it. So a lot of people can be infected by the virus. We're talking in the billions. So even if it's only a small proportion of those people who are going to have symptomatic infections, wind up needing hospitalization, and be at risk of death, that's still a large number, given that you're going to infect so many people.
of months. Can you explain just in layman's terms why the numbers are so dramatically affected by even a few days difference in response time?
If we're not careful.
Well, it is very staggering, and I think it's important to actually quantify it so that you see just how strong that response is. We are dealing with the growth of a new virus in a very susceptible population. It's going through a doubling process. Humidity is a consequence, but they really can swell and overwhelm you, kind of like a tsunami wave. There are many examples that you'll hear in mathematics where they'll try to explain it very simply. One of my favorite is this idea that you have a pond and there's this invasive lily flower that gets into it. And every day it doubles in size or doubles the number that are there. And by, let's say, day 30, the entire pond is covered with lilies. And then the question is, well, on what day was it halfway covered with lilies? And the answer is day 29, just the day before, because it is a doubling process. By jumping on this virus earlier, you are really going to circumvent that growth. You're going to squash that growth down, and you're going to prohibit the number of people who are going to subsequently be infected by taking early action. Shaman. 100,000 American lives would have been saved if WHO and China had told the world when it started, instead of waiting 2 months, as Peter Navarro said. And passenger jets going all over the world spreading coronavirus. Why didn't you write about that? Because you're a fake Democrat like senile Joe Biden. Dear Professor Shaman, please accept my compliments on a superb research project published in the New York Times last Sunday. This epidemic has proven how fragile humans are and how fast a disease can spread in a modern society. I believe other social factors have contributed to how and why this epidemic has multiplied and spread so rapidly in the Phoenix area. The obvious is that this is not the smartest group of people. And the second is how many men frequent massage parlors, the rub and tug type. Governor Ducey opened up service-type businesses, i.e. restaurants, bars, gyms, hair, nail salons, and massage parlors. There are far more of these businesses than the average person is aware of. As a licensed real estate agent, I became aware of these establishments and how many there actually are in the Phoenix area. Married and single men frequent these places for a $200 40-minute session. They do not admit to frequenting these places to their wives, girlfriends, or healthcare people. My husband confirmed that the young guys in his auto body repair shop talked openly about where they went and the costs. Unless caught on camera, as Robert Kraft was, these businesses are very unregulated and a petri dish for every disease known to mankind. My small business was made illegal yesterday. The economic damage is not going to be reversible. And I'm very afraid we don't know what we're actually getting in return for all this chaos. What if the COVID-19 isn't materially additive to the death toll and instead is a replacement to the flu or other sickness and death that 3 million people in the US die from each year? Bad health is bad health. I'm just baffled at the media, doctors, politicians, and academics, and the extreme level of groupthink happening. Take a step back. Take a breath. Be reasonable. Humanity can be seen in quality of life, not just through a lens of life or death. Ask yourself honestly, on your Morning Joe appearance today, would you have had the leadership to say this is overblown? We need to take a step back? Would you put yourself out there like that if it could result in career-ruining consequences? Please forgive me for contacting you through this email. I know it's extremely intruding, and I am sorry. I just can't seem to get this question answered by anyone in my own circle of family doctors. I am 56. I am one of the vulnerable. I am obese, have heart disease and lung disease. However, I am a single mom of 2 teenagers. I know the president is getting ready to open things in the United States. What do I do to stay protected when my children need to go to school? I don't know how this is going to be handled. I'm a single mom. I do not have any aunts, uncles, brothers, or sisters. As my parents had me very late in life, most of my family is either dead or very elderly. I have no place for my children to go if I catch this virus. For sure, I will die. There is no father because these children are adopted, and were adopted as babies. I have been trying to figure out what to do, and the only solution I come up with is that I would have to isolate my children with me until there is a vaccine. To me, this seems abusive and cruel to do to them. Is there something I'm missing here? Is there another way around this? I deeply appreciate absolutely any information and help you can give me. Thank you. Crap is what you said yesterday. Italy had a massive shutdown in January. It's done little. Further, a shutdown like you advocate is legally and physically impossible here. The best way to kill an old person is to put him or her in hospital in these conditions. So most of the stats are border fake. Most doctors are high-class car repairmen, nothing more. I think they like it when people die. Good to see you on the Rachel Maddow Show, and that your research team is receiving appropriate credit for its work in prediction and projection of losses in this COVID-19 era. The reason I contact you is to address the notion of clamping down on flare-ups and why that is a partisan code word. The Chinese and Japanese had time to choose to cover their faces with masks. Their societies feature 1, demure behavior and formality associated with tradition. They, 2, respect the authority of government as long as the 3, government is competent in its actions. Each of these features are in parts absent in the American public, and usually absent completely in red state circles when a Democrat is in office. The Republican partisan line also has a 4th attribute important to my correspondence. Islamophobia vitriol littered the early part of the Trump era, despite his ease of travel allowances on Saudi Arabia, the nation that founded Wahhabism and supplied many of the 9/11 terrorists. Masks are being spun as oppression to fuel an anti-socialist, anti-Islam vibe, even if there isn't a crossover. You are my double! Saw you on CNN. I faked out my friends. They think it was me on TV. The persistent, apparently financially motivated refusal of the CDC and WHO to make the public aware of the free ability of the sleeping while sitting up remedy to save the lives of COVID-19 victims not only amounts to medical negligence. That remedy is commonly used in hospitals these days to save the lives of COVID-19 victims, using hospital beds that have been designed for such purposes. At home, COVID-19 victims can use a couch, armchair, or wheelchair to achieve the same results before the upper portions of their lungs fill with fluids, thereby preventing that from happening. An example of such a public warning is shown at the end of the article below. I have been attempting unsuccessfully to get the CDC and our major news organizations to publish such information for over 2 months now. In my opinion, such deplorable conduct on their part is far more dangerous than mere medical malpractice. It amounts to easily observable, premeditated mass murder for profit on a gigantic scale. Hiya, very quick. You can just click reply and let me quote you, quoting me. I'd like a quotable statement from you saying that if Trump had shut down all entry to the United States for any reason, meaning not one person came in or out legally or illegally, not even the US citizens on the cruise ships, from September of 2019, before the first case was reported anywhere in the world, onward all the way to today. And also if he had instituted a total halt to all shipping, parcels, and mail into or out of the United States. Then if we assume that for some reason this could have been done, he would have prevented all 90,000 deaths from coronavirus in the United States to date. I know it's a weird statement to make, but I'd just like to quote someone saying it. So if you would go ahead and reply with this, it would be great. Thanks so much. Robert, fake news reporter. So one of the biggest problems that we've had over the course of this pandemic is difficulty communicating. Why is it that we see so many of the leaders of the world have failed to actually engage with this virus in an evidence-based approach that listens to what epidemiologists and public health officials have to say? Why have the public health officials and epidemiologists not always been on the same page and been giving differing information? Some of that might be expected and should be self-correcting over time, but why isn't it corrected faster? And, these are real issues that society is going to have to grapple with, because this is not the last pandemic the human race is ever going to see in all likelihood. We've had a lot of additional false alarms in the last 20, 25 years with things like SARS-1, MERS, H5N1, H7N9, chikungunya, Zika, Ebola. We have to be in a position so that when these less frequent but high impact events happen, that we recognize them and that we're able to respond to them, even if they haven't impacted our society for 100 years. In the United States, we hadn't seen an infectious disease threat like this since 1918, and we did not respond well to it. Our government officials did not recognize that this was the time when suddenly public health had to be prioritized over all the other needs, the roads, the economics, other health issues, all the other issues that we're dealing with, and that we had to put aside petty political partisanship and the other governing priorities and get down to the brass tacks of trying to deal with this. And the public health field had to recognize who its experts were that were going to be able to look at this critically and not just spout dogma from a pedestal that had been enthroned upon them as a voice of public health. People who really understood and knew what was going on with infectious disease epidemiology, transmission dynamics, and virology needed to be given the voice. And a link between those two really needed to be established. And we have to find the means for dealing with that, for having that communication in place so that societies can be well primed and positioned to respond to the next threat, if it's 10 years from now or if it's 60 years from now. It's December 13th, 2020, and the Pfizer mRNA vaccine has been approved for emergency use by the FDA and approved by the CDC, and the doses have begun to roll out to all 50 states. First inoculants are going to go in people's arms tomorrow on December 14th, Monday. And this is really a momentous occasion. It's the culmination of 60 years of basic research into this kind of nucleic acid and its use and packaging and delivery as a means of providing inoculant to protect against infectious diseases. It's really incredible that things have come together to allow us to build a vaccine this quickly in this short amount of time that is so highly effective. And this vaccine is effective. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, both of which are based on the same technology, are 95% effective in protecting people against infection or symptomatic infection based on the phase 3 clinical trials. And even more so, for the elderly, it's 94% effective after the second dose of the vaccine. It's a 2-dose vaccine. Now, at the same time, the country is really being rocked by this virus. The last 4 days, there are almost 1 million new confirmed cases. There are over 108,000 people hospitalized right now with COVID-19. Our resources are stretched. There are places where they can't admit patients, and the standard of care is being eroded. This vaccine is not going to turn that around very quickly at all. As a matter of fact, it's going to take some time. So what's really critical is in the coming months, and by that I mean the next 6 to 9 months, we have to maintain our social distancing and mask usage, etc. If we don't do that, the gains that we might have from this vaccine, the ability to deliver it to people before they're ever infected by the virus, will be lost. By letting our guard down, we're going to let the virus accelerate in its transmission and more people be infected before they have the chance to actually receive the vaccine. So it's absolutely critical that we continue doing the social distancing and the mask wearing and the other restrictions that we've done, even though they're tiresome, even though they're exhausting. I think the idea that this is a light at the end of the tunnel is a good one. We have to keep our eye on that long-term prize, and that's holding down and keeping the course that we've laid out in front of us for the next 9 months
while we produce, distribute, and have uptake of these vaccines.